Elizabeth walks toward the inn. Hannah leans out of an upstairs window to talk to her.
If you please, ma'am, there's a gentleman and a lady waiting on you in the parlour. One of the gentlemen's Mr. Darcy.
Thank you. Tell them I shall come.
Hannah goes back inside, and Elizabeth enters, taking off her hat and gloves, as she does. Darcy sees her and stands up quickly. A girl in a light blue bonnet can be seen in the connecting room.
Mr. Darcy, I hope that you've not been waiting long.
Not at all. May I introduce my sister, Georgiana? Georgiana, this is Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
How do you do?
I'm very pleased to meet you, Miss Darcy. I've heard so much about you.
And I about you.
Mr. Bingley is here with us, and very desirous to see you as well. He insisted on accompanying us. May I summon him?
Of course. I should like to see him very much. I understand that you are fond of music and play very well.
Oh no, not play very well. But I'm very fond of music. I should dearly love to hear you play and sing. My brother has told me he's rarely heard anything that gave him more pleasure.
Well, you shall, but I warn you, your brother has grossly exaggerated my talents. No doubt for some mischievous reason of his own.
Oh no, that could not be so. My brother never exaggerates. He always tells the absolute truth. Except that sometimes I think he's a little too kind to me.
An ideal elder brother, then?
Oh yes, I could not imagine a better or kinder one.
You make me feel quite envious. I have no brothers at all, only 4 sisters.
I should have liked to have a sister.
Miss Bennet, I can't tell you how delighted I was when Darcy told me you were not 5 miles from Pemberley. How do you do? But I can see that you're well.
Very well indeed, thank you.
Good, excellent. And your family?
Very well, sir.
Yes? Pray, tell me, are all your sisters still Longbourn?
All except one. My youngest sister is at Brighton.
He looks at Georgiana, who curtsies to Elizabeth and walks over to Darcy.
It seems too long. It is too long since I had the pleasure of speaking to you.
It must be several months.
It is above 8 months at least. We have not met since the 26th of November, when we were dancing together at Netherfield.
I think you must be right.
Do you know, I don't think I can remember a happier time than those short months I spent in Hertfordshire.
Miss Bennet, my sister has a request to make of you.
Miss Bennet, my brother and I would be honoured if you and your aunt and uncle would be guests at Pemberley for dinner. Would tomorrow evening be convenient?
Thank you. We shall be delighted. I can answer for Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner. We have no fixed engagements.
And shall we hear you play?
Oh, if you insist upon it, yes, you shall.
last bar of music of a piano concerto plays to light applause. Darcy watches Elizabeth play the piano. Georgiana stands beside Elizabeth. Bingley sits in a chair. Mrs. Gardiner sits on the couch nearby, listening attentively, while Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley sit next to one another.
Absolutely marvellous.
Will you not play again? You played that song so beautifully.
Oh, not very beautifully, not faithfully at all. You must have seen how I fudged and slurred my way through the difficult passages. It is a beautiful instrument, though.
My brother gave it to me this week. He's so good, I don't deserve it.
Oh, I'm sure you do. Your brother thinks you do, and as you know, he is never wrong.
Darcy notices that they are watching him.
Now, it is your turn. Oh, I absolutely insist.
In front of all these people. I will play, but please don't make me sing.
If you like.
Georgiana begins to play as Elizabeth walks toward the couches.
Pray, Miss Eliza, are the militia still quartered at Meryton?
No, they are encamped at Brighton for the summer.
That must be a great loss for your family.
We are enduring it as best we can, Miss Bingley.
I should have thought one gentleman's absence might have caused particular pangs.
I can't imagine who you mean.
I understood that certain ladies found the society of Mr. Wickham curiously agreeable.
Elizabeth rushes over to Georgiana as Darcy moves as if to stand.
I'm so sorry. I'm neglecting you. How can you play with no one to turn the pages? There, allow me.
Elizabeth looks slowly up at Darcy. They gaze at each other. Later, Mr. Bingley waves as he, Georgiana and Mr. Darcy say goodbye to Elizabeth and the Gardiners as their carriage takes off. Georgiana and Bingley go inside, but Darcy walks a few steps and watches their carriage drive down the torchlit path. As we rejoin the others in the sitting room, Mr. Hurst lies asleep on a couch next to Mrs. Hurst, who sits opposite Miss Bingley. Darcy follows Bingley from outside and pours himself a drink.
How very ill Eliza Bennet looked this evening. I've never in my life seen anyone so much altered as she is since the winter.
Quite so, my dear.
She's grown so brown and coarse. Louisa and I were agreeing that we should hardly know her. What do you say, Mr. Darcy?
I notice no great difference. She is, I suppose, a little tanned. Hardly surprising when one travels in the summer.
For my part, I must confess, I never saw any beauty in her face. Her features are not at all handsome. Her complexion has no brilliancy. Oh, her teeth are tolerable, I suppose, but nothing out of the common way. And as for her eyes, which I have sometimes heard called fine, I could never perceive anything extraordinary in them. And in her air altogether, there's a self-sufficiency without fashion, which I find intolerable.
I think
I remember when we first knew her in Hertfordshire, how amazed we all were to find her a reputed beauty. I particularly recall you, Mr. Darcy, one night after they'd been dining at Netherfield, saying she a beauty. I should as soon call her mother a wit. Oh, but afterwards she seemed to improve on you. I even believe you thought her rather pretty at one time.
Yes, I did. That was only when I first knew her, for it has been many months now that I have considered her one of the handsomest women of my acquaintance.
Elizabeth and the Gardiners are about to go out when Hannah knocks and enters the parlour.
If you please, ma'am, the post's just come.
Thank you, Hannah.
Hannah curtsies quickly and leaves.
Gail that. Very obliging.
2 letters from Jane. Last. I'd been wondering why we hadn't... Oh, this one was misdirected at first. No wonder, for she wrote the direction very ill indeed. Oh, would you be angry if I begged you to postpone our outing?
Not at all. Of course you want to read your letters. Your uncle and I will walk to the church and call back for you in an hour.
Thank you. You're very kind.
The Gardiners leave. Elizabeth sits down to read her letters.
My dearest Lizzie, I hope your journey has been as delightful as you anticipated. We all miss you, our father most of all, I believe. I confess I've hardly had time to write. My nephews and nieces have commandeered almost every moment, but they are such dear children. Our mother indeed finds their exuberance a little trying for her nerves.
Oh, Mamma.
She spends much of the day in her room or with Mrs. Phillips. Oh, dearest Lizzie, since writing the above, something has occurred of a most unexpected and serious nature. But I'm afraid of alarming you. Be assured we are all well. What I have to say relates to poor Lydia.
Lydia?
An express came at 12 last night, just as we were all gone to bed. The letter was from Colonel Forster to inform us that Lydia was gone off to Scotland with one of his officers, to own the truth with Wickham. You will imagine our surprise and shock. To Kitty, however, it does not seem so wholly unexpected. I am very, very sorry. So imprudent a match on both sides, but I am willing to hope the best, and that his character has been misunderstood.
I wish I could believe it.
His choice is disinterested at least. He must know that our father can give him nothing.
Yes, that is true, but how could he do this? She is silly enough for anything, but Wickham, love Lydia, marry Lydia.
We expect them soon, returned from Gretna, man and wife. But I must conclude. I cannot be away from our poor mother long. I shall write again as soon as I have news.
Elizabeth frantically opens the second letter.
My dearest Lizzie, I hardly know what to write, but I have had bad news. Imprudent as a marriage would be, we now fear worse that it has not taken place, that Wickham never intended to marry Lydia at all.
My God, I knew it.
I cannot think so ill of him.
I can. Oh, poor Lydia. Poor stupid girl.
Colonel Forster said he feared that Wickham was not a man to be trusted. They were traced as far as Clapham, and to London our father has gone with Colonel Forster to try to discover them. Dearest Lizzie, I cannot help but beg you all to come here as soon as possible.
Yes. Where is my uncle?
Elizabeth gets up from the table and walks quickly to the door, but Hannah opens it from the other side as she approaches.
Please, ma'am.
Mr. Darcy enters and bows.
Miss Bennet, I hope this is...
Beg your pardon. I must find Mr. Gardiner this moment on business that cannot be delayed. I have not an instant to lose.
Good God, what is the matter? Of course, I will not delay you for a moment, but let me go, or let the servant go and fetch Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner. You're not well enough. You cannot go yourself.
No, I must.
Darcy takes Elizabeth's arm and turns her toward the table.
Come. I insist. This will be for the best. Hello there.
Hannah enters, looking concerned.
Would you have Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner fetched here at once? They walked in the direction of...
The church.
The church.
Yes, sir, at once.
You are not well. May I not call a doctor?
No, I am well. I am well.
Is there nothing you can take for your present relief? A glass of wine? Can I get you one? Truly, you look very ill.
No, I thank you. There is nothing the matter with me. I'm quite well. I am only distressed by some dreadful news which I've just received from Longbourn. Sorry. Forgive me.
No.
I've just received a letter from Jane which had such dreadful news. It cannot be concealed from anyone. My youngest sister has left all her friends, has eloped, has thrown herself into the power of Mr. Wickham. They have run away together from Brighton. You know him too well to doubt the rest. She has no money, no connections, nothing that can tempt him.
Darcy stands abruptly. He is clearly distressed.
When I think that I might have prevented it, I who knew what he was, had his character been known, this could not have happened. But it's too late now.
I am grieved, indeed. Grieved, shocked. But is it certain? Absolutely certain?
Yes. They left Brighton together on a Sunday night. They were traced as far as London, but not beyond. And they are certainly not gone to Scotland.
And what has been done? What has been attempted to recover her?
My father has gone to London. Jane writes to beg my uncle's immediate assistance. I hope that we shall leave within half an hour. But what can be done? I know very well that nothing can be done. How is such a man to be worked on? How are there even to be discovered, I've not the smallest hope. She is lost forever, and our whole family must partake of her ruin and disgrace.
I'm afraid you have long been desiring my absence. This unfortunate affair will, I fear, prevent my sisters having the pleasure of seeing you at Pemberley today.
Oh, yes. Be so kind as to apologise for us to Miss Darcy. Say that urgent business calls us home immediately, and if you would be so kind as to conceal the unhappy truth as long as possible. I know it cannot be long.
You may be assured of my secrecy. But I have stayed too long. I shall leave you now.
Yes. Thank you. Goodbye.
Darcy slowly turns to leave. He does not look back. He closes the door softly behind him.
I shall never see him again.
Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle arrive at Longbourn. Jane greets them. The Gardiners greet their children as Elizabeth goes to the house and hugs Jane in the front hall.
Oh, Lizzie, I am so glad to see you.
Has anything been heard?
No, not yet. But now our uncle is come, I hope everything will be well. Our father left for town on Tuesday, and we've heard from him only once since then to tell us he has arrived in safety. Mamma has been asking for you every 5 minutes since daybreak.
And how is she?
She has not left yet her room.
And you look pale. Oh, Jane, how much you must have gone through.
I'm so happy to see you, Lizzie. Come.
Yes.
Elizabeth removes the last overscarf and hurries to her mother's room as Mr. Gardiner enters the house. Jane and the travelling party enter Mrs. Bennet's bedroom, where she sits, fanning herself with a handkerchief, still in her nightgown.
Oh, Lizzie! Oh, brother! We are all ruined forever! If only Mr. Bennet had taken us to Brighton, none of this would have happened. I blame those Forsters. I'm sure there was some great neglect on their part, for she's not the kind of girl to do that sort of thing if she'd been properly looked after.
Mamma.
And now here is Mr. Bennet gone away. And I know he will fight Wickham, and then he will be killed. And then what is to become of us all? Those Collinses will turn us out before he's cold in his grave. Oh, and if you are not kind to us, brother, well, I don't know what I shall do.
Sister, calm down. Nothing dreadful will happen. I shall be in London tomorrow morning, and there we will consult as to what is best to be done.
Yes, yes, that is it. That is it. You must find them, and if they be not married, you must make them marry. But above all, keep Mr. Bennet from fighting.
Oh, Mamma, I'm sure he does not mean to fight.
Oh, yes, he does. And Wickham will kill him, sure, unless you can prevent it, brother. You tell him what a dreadful state I'm in, and how I have such tremblings and flutterings all over me, such spasms in my side and pains in my head and beatings in my heart that I can get no rest, night or day.
Sister, calm yourself.
And tell Lydia not to give any directions about wedding clothes till she's seen me, for she does not know which are the best warehouses.
Later, the Gardiners and the remaining Bennet daughters sit down to eat.
This is the most unfortunate affair and will probably be much talked of.
Yes, thank you, Mary. I think we have all apprehended that much.
But we must stem the tide of malice and pour into each other's wounded bosoms the balm of sisterly consolation.
Mary, pass the potatoes to your Aunt Gardiner.
I beg your pardon?
Never mind, I will.
Thank you, Kitty.
And that's the first kind word I've had from anyone since Lydia went away. It is most unfair, for it's not as if I have done anything naughty, and I don't see that Lydia has done anything so very dreadful either.
Kitty, please.
Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we must draw from it this useful lesson that loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable.
My dear Mary, this is hardly helpful.
For a woman's reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and therefore we cannot be too guarded in our behaviour towards the undeserving of the other sex.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Mary is pleased. Elizabeth and Jane exchange a look. That evening, Jane stands by a window in the lounge. Elizabeth enters and walks to her.
Now, Jane, tell me everything about it that I've not already heard. What did Colonel Foster say? Had they no apprehension about anything before the elopement took place?
Colonel Forster did own he suspected some partiality on Lydia's side, but nothing to give him any alarm. Lizzie, I feel I am to blame, for it was I who urged you not to make Wickham's bad conduct known. And now poor Lydia is suffering for it. No one else suspected him for a moment. I am to blame.
You are not to blame. No more than I, or Mr. Darcy, or anyone else deceived by Wickham. You have nothing to blame yourself for. Others are culpable, not you.
Jane looks down briefly and takes a piece of paper from inside a book she's been holding.
She wrote a note for Mrs. Foster before she went away.
Elizabeth takes it and opens it. Sitting down, she reads it out loud.
My dear Harriet, oh, you will laugh when you know where I am gone. I cannot help laughing myself at your surprise tomorrow morning as soon as I am missed.
I am going to Gretna Green, and if you cannot guess with whom, then I shall think you a simpleton. For there is but one man in the world I love. Don't send them word at Longbourn of my going. It will make the surprise all the greater when I write to them and sign my name, Lydia Wickham. What a good joke it will be. I can scarce write for laughing.
Thoughtless Lydia! What a letter to have written at such a moment! But at least it shows she believed Wickham's purpose was marriage, whatever he might have persuaded her to afterwards. Oh, poor father, how he must have felt it.
I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word for fully 10 minutes. Our mother was taken ill with the hysterics, and the whole house was in confusion. Lady Lucas has been very kind, offering her services.
She had better have stayed at home. Assistance is impossible and condolence insufferable. Let her triumph over us at a distance and be satisfied.
Lizzie, that is unkind. I'm sure she meant well.
Yes, perhaps she did. I'm sorry. It's just that I can't help Jane, do you not see that more things have been ruined by this business than Lydia's reputation?
That night, Elizabeth sits down at her mirror in her nightgown. Someone knocks on her door, and Elizabeth looks over and pulls her shawl closer around her.
Come in.
Jane enters in her nightgown.
I thought you would not be in bed yet.
She closes the door and walks over to Elizabeth, taking her hand.
I've been thinking about what you said this afternoon, that it is not only Lydia's reputation that has been ruined.
I was angry and upset. I should not have said it. It does no good to dwell on it.
You meant, I suppose, that you and Mary and Kitty have been tainted by association, that our chances of making a good marriage have been materially damaged by Lydia's disgrace.
Elizabeth pats Jane's hand and goes to sit on her bed.
The chances of any of us making a good marriage were never very great. And now I should say they are non-existent. No one will solicit our society after this. Mr. Darcy made that very clear to me.
Mr. Darcy? Does he know our troubles?
Jane sits with Elizabeth.
He happened upon me a moment after I first read your letter. He was very kind, very gentlemanlike, but he made it very clear he wanted nothing more than to be out of my sight. He will not be renewing his addresses to me. He will make very sure his friend does not renew to you.
I never expected Mr. Bingley would renew his addresses, Lizzie. I'm quite reconciled to that, but surely you do not desire Mr. Darcy's attentions, do you?
No. No, I never sought them.
But you do think he was intending to renew them? You think he is still in love with you?
I don't know. I don't know what he was 2 days ago. All I know that is now, he or any other respectable man will want nothing to do with any of us.
Later that week, Kitty is playing by herself in the gardens at Longbourn when she sees a carriage coming.
Oh, Lord.
Kitty runs over to Mary, who is reading a book.
Look who's coming.
Who is it, Kitty?
Well, it's Mr. Collins, of course. Well, I'm not going to sit with him for anyone.
Kitty looks around and runs to the park area behind the brick wall as Mr. Collins' carriage drives by. Later, Mr. Collins stands holding court as Jane, Elizabeth and Mary enter and line up in front of the couch.
I had hoped to condole with your poor father and your mother.
Our father is still in London, sir, and our mother is not yet well enough to leave her room.
He clears his throat and the girls sit down.
I feel myself called on, not only by our relationship, but by my situation as a clergyman, to condole with you all on the grievous affliction you're now suffering under.
Thank you, sir.
It has often been said that a friend in need is a friend indeed, sir.
Yes. Be assured, ladies, that Mrs. Collins and myself sincerely sympathise with you in your present distress, which must be of the bitterest kind, proceeding from a cause which no time can remove. The death of your sister would have been a blessing in comparison. And it is more to be lamented because there is reason to suppose, my dear Charlotte informs me, that this licentiousness of behaviour in your sister has proceeded from a faulty degree of indulgence, though I am inclined to think that her disposition must be naturally bad. Now, howsoever that may be, you are grievously to be pitied.
We are very grateful, sir, for your...
In which opinion I am joined by Lady Catherine de Bourgh and her daughter, to whom I have related the affair in full. They agree with me in apprehending that this false step in one sister must be injurious to the fortunes of all the others.
Kitty peeks through the window from outside to see if he is gone, and then runs off again.
For who, as Lady Catherine herself condescendingly says, will connect themselves with such a family?
Mr. Collins is about to sit down, but Elizabeth stands up quickly.
Who indeed, sir? And now, perhaps in view of that consideration, you may feel that it would be unwise for you to stay any longer.
Well, perhaps you're right. Yes, perhaps you're right, Cousin Elizabeth.
I always feel that a clergyman cannot be too careful, especially one so fortunate as to enjoy the condescension and the patronage of Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Oh, your thoughtfulness does you credit, Cousin Elizabeth.
Mr. Collins backs up, and Mary reluctantly stands.
I am very, very sorry for you all.
Mr. Collins makes a swift exit, clambering back up into his carriage with a deeply saddened expression for the ladies as he leaves.
Insufferable man.
I I suppose he means well.
You suppose wrongly, Jane. His purpose in coming was to enjoy our misfortunes and congratulate himself on his own happy situation.
I think it very kind of him to visit and condole with us.
They wave as the carriage disappears from view. Kitty peeks out from behind the wall behind them.
Is he gone?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Forever, with any luck.
Oh, look, here's Aunt Phillips. She can tell us the news from Meryton.
I doubt there's much to tell we'd care to hear.
Our mother will be pleased to see her.
Well, girls, here's a to-do. Does your mother still keep to her bed?
She's not in bed, but she keeps to her room.
Well, the less the servants hear, the better, I dare say. Come, let me to her, Jane, though heaven knows I've no glad tidings for her.
Mrs. Phillips and Mrs. Bennet gossip in her room.
And not a day goes by but I hear some new bad tale of Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham, that everybody prays to the skies. Mr. Wickham, that half the town was mad in love with, all the time a villain, a very demon from hell, sent to ruin us all.
I have heard he's run up debts with every reputable tradesman in the town.
Oh, sister.
I have heard tales of gaming debts,
Oh, sister.
of drunken routs in which more things were broken beyond repair than heads and furniture, sister.
Oh, sister, stop.
Debauches, intrigues, seductions. They say there's hardly a tradesman in the town whose daughters were not meddled with.
And now he's meddling with our dearest girl, the foul fiend. Well, he shall be discovered and made to marry her.
I have to say, sister, that I always distrusted his appearance of goodness.
Aye, sister, aye, so did I. And I warned the girls.
Too smooth and plausible by half.
But would anybody listen to me? And now here we all are, ruined. Oh, my poor girl, my poor Lydia.
Lydia sits at a window looking out and humming, while Wickham sits in a chair poring over papers and what look like accounts.
When shall we travel into Hertfordshire, my love?
Come away from the window, dear. When I've settled my business affairs, these things always take longer than one thinks they will. You're not unhappy, surely?
Lord, no. Just that I can't wait to see my mother's face, and my sister's. Kitty will be so envious. How I shall laugh. Oh, I hope we shall be married from Longbourn. Then all my sisters will have to be bridesmaids. Oh, I do wish we could go into town and be seen at plays and assemblies.
All in good time. Be patient, dear.
Wickham pours himself another drink.
Lord, it makes me want to burst out laughing when I think that I have done what none of my sisters has, and I the youngest of them all.
Meanwhile, at Longbourn, Jane runs up the stairs to her mother's room.
Mother, here is a letter from my Uncle Gardiner. Father is coming home today.
And does he bring Lydia?
No. They have not yet discovered where she is. My uncle will continue his inquiries alone.
Coming home without poor Lydia? But who will fight Wickham and make him marry her if he comes away? Oh, Jane, what is to become of us all? Oh, fetch my smelling salts. I feel faintness coming upon me again. Oh!
As Mrs. Bennet wails, Mr. Bennet steps out of a coach in the rain and walks past Lizzie into the house.
Not now, Lizzie.
He reaches back and touches Elizabeth's hand. He removes his hat and cloak and drops his walking stick before going into his study and closing the door. Elizabeth watches him silently. That evening, Jane and Elizabeth are holding books that they are not reading, while Mary and Kitty sew.
Shall I go and get father? He's had nothing to eat since he came home.
Let me. You take mother her tea.
Mr. Bennet enters as they stand.
Well, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty,
You look so tired, father. It must have been a dreadful time for you.
say nothing of that. For who should suffer but myself? It has been my own doing, and I ought to feel it.
Oh, Papa.
You must not be so severe upon yourself.
No, Lizzie, let me for once in my life feel how much I've been to blame. I'm not afraid of being overpowered by the impression. It will pass away soon enough.
Do you still suppose them to be in London, sir?
Yes, where else can they be so well concealed?
And Lydia always wanted to go to London.
She is happy then, and her residence there will probably be of some duration.
Mr. Bennet leans forward to take Elizabeth's hand.
Lizzie, I bear you no ill will for being justified in your advice to me in May, which, considering the event, shows some greatness of mind, I think.
I must take Mamma her tea.
She still keeps her stateroom upstairs, does she? Good. It lends such an elegance to our misfortune. Another time I'll do the same. I'll sit in my library in my nightcap and powdering gown, and I'll give as much trouble as I can. Perhaps I may defer it until Kitty runs away.
I'm not going to run away, Papa. If I should go to Brighton, I would behave better than Lydia.
You go to Brighton? I wouldn't trust you as near as Eastbourne, not for £50. No, Kitty, I have at last learned to be cautious, and you will feel the effects of it. No officer is ever again to enter my house, or even to pass through the village. Balls will be absolutely prohibited, unless you stand up with one of your sisters. And you are never to stir out of doors until you can prove you spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner.
Oh.
Well. Don't make yourself unhappy, my dear. If you're a good girl for the next 10 years, I'll take you to a review at the end of them.
Oh.
That evening, Lydia gets up from her bed in a nightgown and walks to the window. Wickham is sitting in a chair, having another drink.
Oh, dearest, shall we not go out tonight? Can we not go to the theatre? Lord, what in the world is he doing here?
What?
Ha! What a joke!
Who is it?
You will never guess.
Who is it?
Mr. Darcy.
The following day, Hill comes out of the back of the house with a basket to take down drying laundry, but slows and puts it down. She approaches Elizabeth and Jane, who are picking berries.
Yes, Hill? What is it? Is Mrs. Bennet asking for one of us?
Oh no, ma'am. I beg your pardon, but did you know an express come for the master from Mr. Gardner?
When did it come, Hill?
Oh, about half an hour ago, ma'am.
Elizabeth puts down her basket and the two take off running. They go across the grounds to under a tree where Mr. Bennet is pacing.
Well, Lizzie?
Papa, what news? What news have you heard from my uncle?
Yes, I've had a letter from him.
What news does it bring, good or bad?
What is there of good to be expected?
Mr. Bennet hands Elizabeth the letter.
Perhaps you'd like to read it yourself. Read it aloud, Lizzie. I hardly know what to make of it myself.
My dear brother, at last I am able to send tidings of my niece and Mr. Wickham. I have seen them both.
It is as I always hoped. They are married.
They are not married. Nor can I find there was any intention of being so. But if you are willing to perform the engagements I have ventured to make on your side, I hope it will not be long before they are. What engagements?
Read on.
All that is required of you is to ensure your daughter has her equal share of £5,000 she will inherit on your death, and also allow her during your life £100 per annum. So little, what about Wickham's debts?
Read on.
You will easily comprehend Mr. Wickham's circumstances are not so hopeless as they are generally believed to be.
There.
Read on, Lizzie.
I'm happy to say there will be some little money, even when all his debts are discharged, to settle on my niece. I cannot believe it.
Read on.
We have judged it best that my niece should be married from this house, of which I hope you will approve.
Oh, poor Kitty will be disappointed not to be a bridesmaid.
Send back your answer as soon as you can, and be sure to write explicitly as to the financial settlement, yours, etc. How can it be possible that he will marry her for so little?
He must not be undeserving as we thought. He must truly be in love with her, I think.
You think that, Jane, if it gives you comfort?
Have you answered the letter?
No, but I must, and soon. And they must marry. Yet he is such a man. Yes, they must marry. There's nothing else to be done. But there are two things I very much want to know. One is how much money your uncle laid down to bring this about. And the other, how am I ever going to repay him?
That evening, Elizabeth wears her nightgown and sits with Jane as she dries her hair before the fire.
I wish I had never spoken a word of this whole affair to Mr. Darcy.
Dear Lizzie, please do not distress yourself. I'm sure that Mr. Darcy will respect your confidence.
I'm sure he will. That's not what distresses me.
What then?
I don't know. How he must be congratulating himself on his escape. How he must despise me now.
But Lizzie, you never sought his love, nor welcomed it when he offered it. If he has withdrawn his high opinion of you now, why should you care?
I don't know. I can't explain it. I know I should probably never see him again. But I cannot bear to think that he is alive in the world and thinking ill of me.